So with that, Stephanie and Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off first with sharing about the first launch of the Shared Services Alliance region in Oregon and focused on sustaining childcare.
Great. Thank you so much, Heidi, and welcome everybody. This slide talks about paving the way towards a sustainable future. Really, when we first started the Alliance, the first Alliance, we told our first group that our first cohort that they were paving the way, that we were the first Alliance in the state of Oregon. We weren't quite sure what we were doing. We were going to do the best we could and see where we got to. And where we got to was from a pilot program to statewide. So that goal we met. Now there's additional 5 counties. So the Coos and Curry County Shared Services Alliance is a relationship-driven alliance of providers working together to support sustainable business practices, increase program profits, and support provider well-being. The ultimate goal is to save providers time so they can focus on meaningful relationships with teachers, children, and families, and earn a financially secure living doing the work they love. I think one of the biggest parts of the Alliance and one of the most important parts is that relationship piece. The relationship that I have and that the other coaches now statewide have with their participants, and the relationships that the participants build with themselves. I mean, they do a lot of meetings and training and coaching, but they don't often have time to sit down with others in this industry to talk about their challenges, their successes, and what maybe they can work on. We used automation through the Wonder School platform to help providers streamline their back office paperwork and to get a better handle on their revenues and expenses so that they knew where they were. The back office, as we all know, of many childcare providers was left unnoticed for a long time. Plenty of supports for training, plenty of supports in the classroom, but not a lot of supports in how to actually run a business. We can use the next slide. So these are the results from our 2021-2022 year for our cohorts that we had in. And as you can see from the infographic on the left, we have had a lot of successes. But again, we started from ground zero, where we started with providers who didn't have budgets, who didn't understand their fiscal health, who didn't, really think about how much tuition were they charging families, and was that tuition covering their expenses? And then how to raise tuition, and even how to ask families who aren't paying them on time to pay them on time. Because we know that if they're not getting paid on time, then they're in a deficit. The quotes that you see there, these are some of my favorite things about doing the Alliance. Is we were able to sit down and have discussions one-on-one and as a group when we went to the evaluation phase. And I asked them all, for some insight and for some quotes about what difference did the Alliance make to you? And so on these quotes is my favorite thing about the Alliance was realizing how important my business is to the community and that I have to treat it like a super important business. We had providers who didn't think of themselves as businesses. So that was the first mind shift that we made, is having them think of themselves as a business. It's not a hobby, it's not a side gig. This is their business, and the importance of their business in the community and in the local economy. Without childcare, people can't go to work. So having them understand that you're not just, watching people's kids for the day, you're contributing to the like I said, to the local economy, and you're building the foundation for these kids. I mean, super important work. Another one of our providers said that for me personally, being able to connect with other resources to better my program has been my favorite thing about the Alliance. Being able to know about other resources. Now, I don't know about all the resources, but we learned from each other. I think it's a great program for support from mentors and colleagues. I found that before the Alliance, I felt alone and did not have access to colleagues to learn common practices in various aspects of running my business. So there's that community of the providers, you know, that a place where they could come together and talk about their challenges. And, you know, we had conversations, for instance, about, you know, in that I have a parent who hasn't paid me and it's been 2 or 3 weeks, and how do I have that conversation? And so they were able to get input from other people who've dealt with that and who've overcome it, and to help them understand how to have those conversations and let parents know it's like, I'm running a business here, just like you're going to work and you're working at a business or have your own business. This is my business. So I think that with that mind shift that they got from to being a business owner really helped with that. And then the last quote here is that the most helpful thing would be the support this group provided. I truly benefited from their view of us as professionals with a business that we should take seriously. Again, that was the understanding that they're a business, that they're an important business. And it was interesting because we have had providers in our alliance who've been in the field for quite a while. And this is the first time that that shift really took place, that they really understood, you know, the importance of the work they were doing and the need for them to keep track of their revenues, keep track of your expenses. You want to stay open, you know, and you don't want to have to pull money from your own pocket. You do, in fact, want to be able to pay yourself. Okay, so, and then the next slide. When we first started the Alliance, as I mentioned at the beginning, we were the first in the state of Oregon to do it. We didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, I didn't really know. It was my first time I'd heard of this, but we worked really closely with Opportunities Exchange. I think an uncountable number of emails between myself and Louise. We were able to get linked because she has a bigger pot of people to get a hold of than I do. She was able to link me with other programs so that when I had questions or when I needed some help, I had other people to reach out to. I did, in fact, realize that we were not reinventing the wheel, that the wheel was out there. I just needed to find, you know, the right rims and the right traction for that. We linked up with Wonder School so that we could help our providers automate. Wonder School platform, those of you who don't know about what they offer, this is a place, a one-stop where providers can get all their information about their program. They can communicate with families, they can do revenues and expenses, they can have automatic billing so that the money is automatically taken from the parents' bank account and given to the provider within a few days so that they are getting paid on time. That was a big one. I think one of the greatest things at the beginning, when some of the hesitation that our providers had because of fear of the unknown, the first thing we did with them was set up websites. And that really contributed to the mind shift to like, hey, now I have a really beautiful website. People can find me, they know what I'm doing. And it was really good. We collaborate with Care Connections, our local CCR&R. And the greatest thing about that relationship is that they opened the door for me. Our providers trusted the staff at Care Connections, and because Care Connections referred me to them, they were less hesitant to let me, to listen to me about the Shared Services Alliance and then to let me in the door. So that was great. And of course, our Alliance members who, like I said, I mean, they went into the unknown, and those that had been in business a long time were hesitant at first to change the way they were doing things. But once they realized the benefit it would have for their program, they were more open and willing to try new things and to dive into ponds that they may not have stuck their toes in before. So that's really the core group that they got this ball rolling. The core group that, you know, we stuck together. We are happy that we were able to implement this at a local level, because when something didn't work, we were able to pivot, and we did pivot quite a bit. Looking kind of, if you look back now at the path we took, it looks more like a maze than it's definitely not a straight line. But these relationships are core to why we've been as successful as we have. In the next slide. The funding that we received to do this, South Coast Business is a subrecipient of funding from the Oregon Community Foundation and the Early Learning Division that goes through Care Connections and to us. We also had a generous grant from the Ford Family Foundation that allowed us to buy for one thing, that allowed us to buy our Alliance members iPads so that they could put all their business on one device, so that they weren't having to go back, communicate with parents with their phones, do their enrollments on their computer. The iPad has allowed them to keep all their business information on one platform, on one device. And this is great, because we talked a lot about, when do I have time for revenues and expenses? And it's like, well, take a break, take yourself on the weekend, go to the coffee shop, bring your iPad and do some of the work you need to do. Make it something that you enjoy doing, not a drudgery, not something that you really don't want to have to do, and that you really don't think you have the time to do. So we try to give them some different ideas and different ways to figure out how to take the time, how to get this work done. So like I said, we're really excited that our local Shared Services Alliance, that the work that we did here was recognized, and that the state now, I believe the state now has up to 5 counties who they are working with the Shared Services Alliance, and it's just taking off, and it's really helping programs with that stability. We have, I think, 3 or 4 programs in our alliance now who have moved from registered family to certified family, who've taken that step. We have a program that has switched from regulated to licensed. And we have our newest cohort of alliance members who participated in our Launch and Learn program, our Business Accelerator program, who are now working their way into licensing. Some have been licensed, some are still working, and starting them at the foundation, being part of Shared Services, and getting off to a really strong start. We believe that over the course of time, I think that we hope to increase the childcare supply here in the Coos and Curry area, over 100 slots, and we just have time. I mean, we're tiny, right? But we're mighty. We're tiny, but we're mighty, and we're doing really, really good work. And I think that covers it. Does that cover it, Heidi?
That's great, Stephanie. Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce our next panelist in just a moment. I wanted to let folks know we do see that some questions are coming through in the chat. We're tracking that. And after everyone presents and we move into more of a facilitated panel discussion, we'll see how many questions we can get to from the audience. So I'd love to introduce our next couple of panelists. We're really pleased, and Stephanie, thank you again. That was so wonderful. We're really pleased to be joined now by Karen Prow from Neighbor Impact, which is the Child Care Resource and Referral Agency in Central Oregon, along with Catherine Brown from the Small Business Development Center in Central Oregon, COCC. They're joining to talk to us about their childcare business accelerator that's really focused on expanding the supply of childcare in Central Oregon. Thrilled to have you two here. This is a very comprehensive approach to building childcare capacity and strengthening childcare business owners. And I'm really excited for all of the participants to get to hear from you today. So we'll turn it over to you and take it away. You've got about 10 minutes.
Excellent. I'm going to start it out. So Catherine Brown from Central Oregon Community College. I think it's just relevant to highlight my background. So I've been a STEM educator, science educator for the past 10 years. As many teachers, I never saw my own children. So when I had my daughter, I decided to transition to being home and running an in-home daycare. I ran an in-home care the past 3 years and saw that this opportunity came up. So I've now been hired at COCC as the early child care project manager that's taking over the lead with instructing and advising for the Business Accelerator program, as well as additional projects that we're touching on. Next slide, please. So what was our program initiative? I'm going to echo a lot of what Stephanie said and sort of like what our goal was ultimately. Many of the centers in our area closed during the pandemic and were not able to reopen the doors. And real estate here is so tight and the staffing crisis compounding that centers are having difficulty operating. So when we considered how can we solve this childcare desert, we really wanted to create a launch and sustainability program to create more quality licensed care in our area, focusing on home-based providers. So we've developed a business accelerator program that supports individuals with both the licensing and the business aspects of creating a registered family or certified family licensed care. I agree with what Stephanie said, that many of our providers don't see themselves as business owners. So part of our program is really focusing on an identity shift, that you are a loving caregiver that wants to be home with children, and you're a professional educator offering early education, and you're a business owner. So learning how to wear those multiple hats is very important. We offer this program. We started in fall of 2021. We've since done 4 English cohorts and 2 Spanish cohorts. The way that the system works, the way that our course works, it's 21 hours of classroom time. Many of our families are working parents, so we offer the courses 6 to 9 at night. We also offer them dinner, and it's 7 sessions. The sessions are staggered to every other week, so that in between those times, they have a one-on-one business advising session with me. So we take the content that we've learned in class and focus it on their individual program. As Stephanie said, many of our providers don't have a budget. They just, whatever so-and-so wants to pay them is what they'll take. And they really just don't understand the true cost of care. And not only just the true cost of break even, but also as a business owner and now your own employer, like how do you target benefits? And how do you think about saving for retirement and all the other aspects that come into truly being a professional business owner? So in those one-to-one advising sessions, we work with them on creating a business plan, a parent handbook, a tuition contract with an inclusion policy. We work on creating a startup and operational budget, as well as we plug them into all the services of the child care resource and referral network by connecting them with the quality care improvement staff and individuals with Spark and Baby Promise and Preschool Promise. So at the end of our course, individuals are eligible once they become licensed and operational to receive a $5,000 startup grant. That startup grant is up to the individual how it gets used for their program. It can either go into startup materials, or if they're already set to go. For instance, we've had several recorded programs that have now transitioned into registered family. So that fund has been helpful in sort of supporting that transition and the overhead operational costs before they get full enrollment. It is also useful for some individuals to be able to hire on an additional employee as they make the RF to CF transition. We have also partnered with the Child Care Alliance, and I'll let Karen talk more about that. But at the end of our Business Accelerator program, we've created a soft landing with the Oregon Child Care Alliance for them to continue business support and coaching. And through that OCCA Alliance subscription, they get a year of Wonder School paid, so that they're able to launch their business using that child care management software to kind of, with that iron triangle of financing, it's not just what you charge, it's also that you're collecting full enrollment from your families and how to automate that system. I'm going to transition now to Karen, next slide please, to talk about really what's made our program successful is the partnership.
Thank you, Catherine. So one of the things that we had done in Central Oregon prior to this project rolling out is really try to partner with different groups who could potentially bring some strength-based business coaching to our providers. And really, this is one of those silver linings of the pandemic, that we had someone from the City of Bend Economic Development actually come up with some of their early ARPA dollars and approach Ken from SBDC and myself and say, what could you do with this? If we had funding for you, what kind of project could you roll out to really meet the needs of providers and get them set up with a stable and sustainable business model? And so it was really that initial investment that got the conversations going and forced us into a room to sit down and say, why hasn't this worked before? What do we need to do to actually roll this out in a different way this time? And have those conversations about what does the content look like and where are the gaps that are currently not being addressed in our system to be able to stand up strong business. And then really look at what portion of this is something that should be led by the Small Business Development Center with their teaching, and what parts should be kind of that guest speaker model of bringing in people from childcare resource and referral to focus on the quality piece of it. And really thinking about the fact that if you do not plan for quality when you're initially standing up your business, then you're not really setting yourself up for success. You're undercutting yourself in a way where you're not having enough income to be able to pay for the expectation of that higher quality piece. So, bringing that all together made a huge difference for us. The other thing was originally hired by SBDC was Lisa Tynan, who has now moved on to be the director of the Oregon Child Care Alliance. But she and staff members here at Child Care Resources really worked on the curriculum. What does this look like? And what are the things that we see providers experiencing, especially in their early years as a provider, that might become an off-ramp from providing care? So what are the things that drive people out of the business? How do we make sure they have all of those concepts firmly under their belt before we send them off into the world of early care and education? So I will pass it back to Catherine with the next slide.
So who have we helped so far? This program was geared to support the Tri-County region of Central Oregon, so Deschutes, Jefferson, and Crook County. Since launching it in fall of 2021, we've had over 68 graduates, or 68 registered, 32 graduates, and over 26 grants with some pending. So you might notice, okay, there's a difference in the numbers here between registered versus completed versus who's getting the grant. And that kind of goes into some of the barriers and challenges that we focused as we've worked through the program, including starting out with prerequisites that are aligned with what individuals need to do for the prerequisites to become a registered family. So taking their IRF 1 and 2 training, water lead testing, having everyone in the home over 18 enroll in the Central Background Registry. The Central Background Registry delays have kind of been a barrier for individuals to become fully licensed and operational. But so far the numbers are need to be updated in that little blip there, but we've had 26 grants dispersed, and that's been for licensed providers. And so we've generated over 260 slots in our area and distributed over $130,000 in grants to support childcare slots for working parents. So we're really excited about the success that we've had, and especially as we've transitioned from pilot to trying to figure out how this works to now a very established program, we're seeing a much higher rate of success. So I do want to highlight too, the benefit has been, the rural communities are the most impacted by these childcare deserts, and our program in focusing on the support of launching this in-home care, we've been able to truly represent the Tri-County. We have individuals, managers out to Prineville and LaPine and Bend, if you're familiar with our area. So we've been able to kind of cast a huge net of support in our region. Next slide, please. So this is where Karen will kind of piggyback. We touched on this, but a bit, we wanted to make sure that we're setting them up to sustain and keep that support going as they encounter difficulties after they've launched and are operational. So that's where they plug back into the Oregon Child Care Alliance, and Karen can tell you how that model looks locally.
Yeah, so the beauty of the Oregon Child Care Alliance, as it has rolled out statewide after Stephanie so brilliantly shared the beginnings of all of that, but now it's a statewide model where we have the backbone agency who oversees the different rollouts and levels of support for that shared services model. And then locally, we house coaching. And so we actually have someone who can be a coach, be a mentor to these new programs that are joining our workforce as early educators. And so when someone completes this SBDC Neighbor Impact Accelerator class, then we just roll them gently into the Oregon Child Care Alliance. And so that can include the Wonder School software, includes a cohort. So all these people they've been attending classes with, they get to continue those relationships and experience that stability as they move on and grow their business. And then they're already connected with someone. So when they start thinking about the quality of their business, or they run into a barrier they weren't expecting, they have someone right there they can reach out to and talk to. And then we can move them into things like Oregon Spark and other continuous quality improvement work to keep that going. And then next slide, please. For funding sources for this project, like I said, it originally was seed money from the city of Bend. And once the project had been really built out, Deschutes County also gave a significant contribution to the pot. And then City of Sisters and some other regional partners also gave us money to keep going. And we were able to serve quite a few people, be able to get some data to tell the story. And then we were able to approach the last legislative session and actually get a large investment of $8.2 million brought into our area to help grow and stabilize childcare. And from those dollars, we have enough money to be able to, fund Catherine's position so that we have someone solid at SBDC doing this great work. And then we have enough money to roll out additional cohorts and grow some other things that Catherine's going to talk about in the next slide.
Next slide, please. So going back to the partnership that Karen and Ken, the director of the SBDC here, really kind of pulled together was combining the resources of the childcare with the mindset of the business that we're able to supply. So in most regions at the community college, the childcare resource and referral is housed in the same community college as the Small Business Development Center, which means that this is a great platform for building those partnerships across the state and hopefully bringing this program across the state. So with the recent funds from the legislative bill, we are taking a portion of that, and I am working on a train the trainer workshop and a teacher curriculum guide for the current program that we have set. We've worked through a lot of the nuances and details, and we really have a solid program at this point for the registration, the marketing, the enrollment, and MOU agreement with providers, the curriculum, and the stages afterwards. So we are hoping to take this program and bringing out to regions across the state. So far, I've engaged in conversations with Columbia Gorge, Lane County, the Southern Oregon South Coast, and Oregon Coast. We hope to have 3 to 6 regions adopt this business accelerator program for home-based and hope to generate between 500 and 1,000 new slots across the state. So I'm in the works right now of making those connections and building those arrangements. So if anyone here is a representative of a Child Care Resource and Referral Network, please make contact with me. I would love to talk with you about how to bring this program out to your county for additional support. And I would say a major thing to think about that we've kind of worked through. Next slide, please. So here's my contact, and then Hannah Cool is sort of my counterpart at Neighbor Impact, working under Karen for our program. And I can send out additional information. The Child Care Biz at Neighbor Impact is her contact, but I'm kbrown28@vocc.edu. Please contact for more questions. And then last slide, I just want to touch on, we've worked through a lot of the nuances and the biggest barriers and challenges. And I know this is a part of Q&A, but I'm just going to touch on it here, is making sure individuals can get through those central background registry checks. And also for the home-based license, making sure they have a landlord-approved facility. So as you looked at our numbers, some of the barriers we're faced is individuals were ready to get licensed and they were told by their HOA that they couldn't operate a business out of their home. So that's a part of our advocacy work right now, is to remove those like discriminatory practices from landlord and HOA agreements that prevent people from operating childcare businesses out of their home. So that is our program presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Karen and Catherine. Super interesting. Can't wait to dig in a little more when we get to Q&A with you all. And now I'd like to invite our final panelist, Gustavo Morales, to share with us about the work that EUVALCREE is doing in Eastern Oregon to expand childcare options in a rural community that are also culturally and linguistically specific. So this project is so important. It really hits on multiple areas of need, addresses multiple gaps in our current childcare supply in Oregon. So Gustavo, welcome. The floor is yours, and thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you so much. I do want to apologize that I unfortunately am the black sheep of the panelists. I am having tech issues, so you won't be able to see me, and I won't be able to share my supporting documents, but I will see if I can get it shared with the team here to be able to distribute to folks who are interested in keeping those notes. I will do my best to articulate them, and hopefully you're able to follow along. My name is Gustavo Morales, and I serve as the Executive Director of EUVALCREE. We're a nonprofit based in Eastern Oregon, serving 8 counties. And as you all are aware, childcare is an essential component to our life in order to be able to help meet workforce needs, business needs, community needs, and just basic essential needs. And more importantly, outside of just childcare access, having culturally specific and linguistically appropriate childcare, both for our diverse communities, but also for our communities to be able to have a safe space, to be able to get the early learning that they need to be successful as they transition into kindergarten and the K-12 system. If folks, for whatever reason, can't hear me, please don't hesitate to let me know. And if I'm going too fast, please don't hesitate to tell me to slow down.
You're doing, it's perfect right now, Gustavo. Don't worry about it. And I don't know if you can see people, but folks are smiling, they're engaging.
Great, thank you. Why did we get into this work? Our organization began to delve into education in the K-12 system specifically. But as we were working with K-12, we saw a huge gap, as many of you see, in childcare. And in order for us to be effective long-term, to ensure that our students and our children had access, we wanted to make sure that we were able to meet basic needs across the spectrum. K-12 is not a perfect system, but it's a system that helps support our students nonetheless. When we look at childcare, that's completely absent. And so there's not even a starting place for the children to develop their early learning, especially for our diverse communities within the agricultural industry, which is the major industry within our rural communities in Eastern Oregon. And so even to get them to the starting line, we need to bridge that childcare gap. So we come to our first issue, capacity. Both in the absence of childcare, but also having individuals who are willing to pursue the option of childcare as a way to provide a service, but also develop a livable wage and a financial way to sustain themselves and their family to be able to move forward in life in a positive way. The second challenge is sustainability. You heard from our colleagues and our other panelists the challenges of being able to maintain the business model of childcare. And the third challenge of being able to start up a business. You might have someone who's interested, you might have someone who's able to develop capacity, you might have someone who can balance the model. But the cost of investing into a startup, whether it be developing a new facility, using your own home to be able to child care, and or just purchasing the supplies, the equipment, and the materials that are needed is pretty significant for the return of investment that you get going into childcare. And so we have three significant challenges that most folks who are looking at business would probably shy away from pursuing. And so how is it that we overcome all three challenges and still create it, make it feasible, sustainable, practical, and more importantly, relevant so that community members have access to basic learning environment at an early age? So that's where our program begins to come in. When we began the Childcare Oasis program, it was keeping these three challenges in mind. So how do we develop capacity? The truth is there's no short way to develop capacity. It requires a significant investment into developing the skills and education that folks will need. So when we're developing the work within the Childcare Oasis program, one, we're developing a capacity pipeline, which will eventually lead to the workforce pipeline, if we want to use business terms, to help stimulate and develop individuals' ability to get the education, the background, and the essential skills that they need to be able to successfully manage childcare. Our colleagues touched on the importance of understanding business. The program in Childcare Oasis has two components. One, the entrepreneurship arm, which is helping these individuals understand the concept of business, developing the essential skills, and being able to administer their business. The second part is being a childcare provider, learning the ins and outs of childcare development, or learning, ensuring that they're able to work and provide age-appropriate services to the children that they're serving, and doing it in a way that, again, provides a positive environment. You're asking them to take two concepts to which people take years to study: business administration, 4 years to get your MBA outside of the bachelor's, or excuse me, a year outside of a bachelor's, so 5 years of higher ed, and child development. I mean, you can get your doctorate degree in child development. And so you can almost spend a decade learning this, and we're asking people to learn it in a matter of a couple of months. So how do we do that? It comes down to the practical components, the ins and outs, and being able to have the basic essential skills and personalities. If we're being transparent, not everyone can be a childcare provider. Just like not everyone can be a doctor, not everyone can be a teacher. It requires a special kind of person. And we're being honest in saying that because we recognize that it requires a special type of temperament, a special type of personality, and that is almost as essential, if not the most essential component to having long-term success and retaining childcare providers. And so as you're moving forward, it's not a matter of how many people go through a program, it's the quality of people that go through the program. You can teach people business, you can teach people age-appropriate tools and traits that they can use to work with the children, but you can't teach them temperament, you can't teach them personality. And so as we're moving forward, those are important items to take into consideration as you're expanding the capacity of childcare, especially if we're looking at long-term success. So once we've conducted the initial intake in this process in the program, we move forward into the classroom. The classroom provides them the basic tools, education for both business administration and childcare development. Once they successfully pass those two courses, we transition them into the actual classroom where they have 500 hours of experience working with different age groups to develop and harness what they learn in the classroom in the space of where they're working with children. Once they've successfully completed their supervised 500 hours, then we transition to the third phase of the program, which is the opening of their childcare center. I will take a step back and note, while they're going through the courses, there's stuff happening in the background, which is helping them set up their childcare. So by the time they complete their 500 hours and pass all the required courses, they will be ready to start and kick off their own childcare center in the space that has been previously identified as they've entered the program. And so once they completed the 5 hours, we have created a sponsorship program for the students who came into the program of up to $20,000 of startup funds for their childcare center. Now, this $20,000 isn't intended to compensate the person for their time. This is intended for tangible items that are required or needed: playground equipment, shelves, books, toys, supplies, any upgrades that they may need to do to their home in order to maintain compliance with the facility, and really being able to get them started with everything that they would need to successfully move their program forward. Once we've been able to set up, we provide 6 months of direct support to the individuals. So basically, we're on call with them as they're providing the service to the children to whatever their capacity has been set based on their location on their facility, whether it be 16 or whether it be a 5. The goal is to be able to get individuals who are committed to helping children in a safe environment and get them into a place where they can make a livable wage doing it. After the 6 months period, we will be able to support them over the course of the next 2 years, helping them on the administration side of their business to help talk through filings, management reports, be able to connect them with accountants and legal support as needed for ensuring the compliance of their business, both at a state and federal level. We understand that a lot of this work is just going to take time and practice, which is why we have a 3-year investment with every individual and essentially business that comes through, because they're not going to learn it in 6 months or 500 hours. It's going to take time and it's going to take exposure. But we want to be sure that we are able to hold their hand when they need it. And as we're moving through the process, to eliminate the hesitation, the concerns, the nervousness of being overwhelmed with everything that has to be learned on top of doing this work. Because what we want is to have a childcare provider who can meet the needs of a child. If we can build that, then there's a lot of options and a lot of opportunities that person can do to help bridge the gap in the capacity that is very much needed to overcome this childcare desert. You can build buildings, you can build playgrounds, you can build the equipment that is needed, but if you do not have a provider to be able to fill the space, to provide the environment that is needed, none of that matters. So how did we get here? The program overall was built in 3 phases. 1, it was the development of the center itself, the physical building. 2, we led into the entrepreneurship program and the childcare Oasis program, which again houses to support X number of children, and it varies depending on the facility, to provide almost like a teaching center for these childcare. I think an analogy that was used recently that I really liked was that of a teaching hospital, kind of where doctors go learn to be doctors. The entrepreneurship and child Oasis program is just that. It's a place for providers, where providers can go to learn to be providers, childcare providers. 3rd phase, they transition out, set up their own shop. We support them throughout the process for the next 2.5 years after they exit the program. And the 4th phase is long-term retention, working with families and the childcare providers to create relevant, practical, and meaningful collaborative work. Why do I say that? Well, that transitions into the next question, which is the funding. How did we get the money? How did we do this work? How were we able to move forward? Our funding came through legislature. In collaboration with a number of partners, we submitted House Bill 5202, which made a significant investment into childcare in different areas of $100 million. Now, keep in mind, we did not get $100 million. The collaborative got $100 million, which got distributed in different ways. One of the things that I will flag for folks on the call that this collaborative will be funding, and is funding and is currently in development, is a fund that will be coming through an entity called Seeding Justice, which provides capacity building funds to entities who are looking to establish their childcare centers. The program has not yet released, but there is a significant pool, and I will need to confirm, but I want to say it's in the ballpark of about $22 million that will be invested across the entire state. But I will have to go back and confirm that number by looking at the policy package. But given the nature of the call and who's on it, flagging it for everyone, as most folks may be able to qualify for the program, especially if you're looking to start in the area and sector of childcare. And Seeding Justice is the name of the organization that will be administering those funds. So if you're not on their newsletter, I would encourage you to enroll so that you can get updates. So coming back, we were part of that policy package, or excuse me, I should say that overall package to receive funding to help invest into this. Right now, we're in proof of concept model. We're implementing this program in Malheur County. We were expanding it now into Umatilla County. Our goal is to generate approximately 100 new slots per site every 6 months. And so with 2 sites, if all goes well, every year we'll be generating 200 new sites. We expand that to another site, again, 200 more sites. So the more sites that open under this model, the capacity right now, and it's probably going to be a good capacity to be able to sustain the program as well as not flood that business model. Additional funding also came from grants from the major foundations, grants, Ford, Meyer Memorial, and Oregon Community Foundation to help stimulate different parts of this programming. When we're looking at the challenges, things that you want to keep in mind is if you're going to build a site for your program, the cost for construction is significant. Outside of the significant financial investment to build your own site, you're also looking at long wait times for the permitting process. As much as we would have liked and hoped that the permitting process is quick, it unfortunately varies from county to county, city to city, and the permitting process itself varies in its own respective regions. So as you're looking at making sure that you time the permitting process correctly, because it may be 6 months before you're even able to break ground. And even then, with the way that things are shifting within on the construction side, the cost of the construction project may change over that course of that time because of how much the materials fluctuate from, and it's not just from month to month, it's from week to week. And so if you're looking to build a site, construct a site, you want to be able to have that all in order to be able to get your project moving forward. Now, jumping from, I think I lost audio for a split second. Am I back?
Oh, no, you're good, Gustavo, but we have to wrap up this section in just a second so we can switch to questions.
Thank you.
But we haven't lost you, don't worry.
Great. So the last concern or item that I will bring folks to think about is your occupational permits. So as you're building a new site, you have to set up your occupation, making sure that you do that appropriately, because that also may provide a kink in your step that may delay your project even further. And so making sure that you're meeting the state requirements, working with your local CCR&Rs, your child care and resource referrals, and the early learning division to ensure that your occupation is accurately set. So when you submit your permits to get permitted for your occupation, that's not an issue and or a burden.
Awesome. Thank you. Gustavo, we really appreciate it and really appreciate you joining and hanging in there through the tech issues. That was great. Really helpful information. So we are going to transition to a couple questions for our panelists from Heidi and myself. And then we'll see if we have time for audience questions. Audience members, you also have folks' email addresses. so if you have a question, a specific question about a specific project, feel free to reach out to the folks at Ford and they can help pass your question on to our panelists, or for panelists that have shared their contact information directly with you, you can feel free to reach out to them as well. So we're going to pivot to just a little bit of facilitated conversation with our panelists. And so for Stephanie, Karen, Catherine, and Gustavo, our first question for you is to have you share a little bit more about the challenges that you experienced launching, things that you would advise others who are thinking about embarking on similar work, similar projects to think about. What were some of your challenges, and then where are you seeing success now? And I think we'll actually start with our folks at the South Coast Shared Services Alliance, simply because you all have been at it the longest, so you have more of a time to look back on and think about the challenges you've experienced. So Stephanie, or it looks like Taya's here now too. So Stephanie or Taya, feel free to hop into that one, and then we'll turn to our other panelists for answers to the same question.
Well, I mean, I can start off by saying, consider this. The Alliance started the beginning of 2020. So one of our biggest challenges was COVID, and the fact that all of the communications I had with members of the Alliance were all Zoom. I mean, we were not meeting people in person. So developing those relationships, electronically rather than in person, was a challenge. I recommend that people who start alliances, who have their coaches, do take the time, and I do now take the time to go out and talk with our members in person, to see their sites, to let them show me around, and see what they have going on. I think that another challenge that we had was just being in a rural area and having people opening up their minds to participating in something new, and adding more to their plate. But again, like I said earlier, I think it's the relationship that we have with Care Connections, that I have with Taya and Danae, really kind of smoothed out that. And because they trust them, they were like, well, they wouldn't, refer somebody to me who's not gonna be helpful, who's not gonna be able to, to provide good information to me. So that really opened up the door. If you're starting an alliance in your area, especially a rural area, you have to link with your local CCR&R to do that. You can't do it without that connection. Ted, what other challenges you've?
I think one thing that was a big area of learning for us early on was that we were ready to jump right into automation, go straight to Wonder School. And we found out while working with our providers that they really needed and wanted some basic business information and understanding before we moved into automation. So making sure that that's now built in more, where we make sure that they get those business trainings up front, make sure they understand how to create a solid budget before we just go moving it all electronically, and that trust is so important. It's important for them to start trusting their own abilities around the financial pieces before they go towards technology where they don't necessarily have a lot of trust either. So that was an important change for us, is build those basic building blocks first before we go into the more techie pieces.
How about for our folks in Central Oregon? What challenges did you face? What learning are you pulling as you're kicking off this business accelerator and starting to grow it to other parts of the state?
Well, I can speak to a couple of things that came up in Central Oregon that I think are going to be relevant in bringing this across the state. As you work with individuals that are trying to create a licensed childcare out of their home, they're probably going to face similar issues with HOA agreements and landlords. So making sure that they can operate legally a business out of their home. A second barrier is going to be, the continued challenges with the central background registry, making sure that everyone gives appropriate time and leeway time to be able to get through that. As we also roll this program out to other places that are going to be offering a Spanish cohort, there's a lot of different nuances and cultural considerations as part of that, including if individuals do not have a social security, then giving leeway time to get them even more to do a paper form through the central background registry. If individuals have an I-10, there's a different process for getting their tax ID so they can legally collect income and pay taxes. And also just, we originally offered the Spanish and English as together with translation services, and we found that was kind of an equity challenge. So it's been much more successful to have a separate English and Spanish cohort with the home-based program. And then I will mention that when you're working with the Latin community, there might be a sort of spectrum of tech literacy. And so many challenges with our program is, for individuals to become licensed, they have to create accounts with the Oregon Child Care Workforce Development to take their classes. They have to register for ORO or online. They have to do different accounts. And so those different processes of registering accounts and working through tech can be challenging if an individual doesn't have the tech literacy. So it just takes a little more time in working with those providers. Karen, I don't know if you have any additional sort of overall project considerations and barriers.
I think in the very beginning, we really got caught up in getting this out quickly. And so, trying to show our funders that we could do this, just be really agile. And part of that led to us enrolling people who weren't ready for the class. And so just make sure you slow down and give yourself time to consider all of these things and really listen to your providers in your community or prospective providers about what their strengths are, where they really need to grow skill. And again, that partnership with Child Care Resource and Referral, because that's what is done in those offices all the time, is getting people up and ready to be providers. So making sure that you slow down and not leave people behind or frustrated with the speed of the project.
And I would just say in general, as I advise childcare providers on their business plan and their financials, there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt and shame in providers' identity over taking and accepting money for their services. So they don't want to charge, they don't want to raise their rate. So I think that's something to consider too. You really have to meet people where they're at and have that empathy and understanding. They're putting themselves in the parent's shoes rather than a business owner's shoes. And so there's a lot of work around identity shift and just kind of sort of creating a more professional identity in this career that we all collectively are working towards.
Yeah, really hearing themes around needing to be patient and to build trust and to take the time that it takes to build trust and to be patient and supportive with your providers as you're winding through a system that can take time to get through. I'm curious to hear from you, Gustavo, as you've been standing up Childcare Oasis. What kind of lessons have you learned? What challenges or barriers have you faced, and how have you been navigating them on your end?
So in my presentation, I jumped this question a little bit, talking about the challenges with the permitting process, construction, and being able to set up a physical site. But in addition to that and what my fellow panelists have shared, I would say ensuring that you're able to maintain a positive relationship with the clients and the folks that you're working with, and having that patience. If you don't have the capacity to take the time to help the client, I would say that is going to be a significant barrier to being able to provide meaningful services, because there's a lot of folks who come from, outside of computer literacy, varied language, varied education, and varied social experiences. And all of that plays a factor in being able to develop a meaningful relationship with the client to be able to provide the services. And if folks don't feel comfortable working for you or working with you, it makes it very difficult to maintain that relationship to be able to meaningfully help them, to be able to meaningfully get to where they need to be able to provide the service. And so one of the things that I often share with folks is it requires a special kind of person to work with folks. And me, I'm just going to share one example. Me as a male working with a 30 or 40-year-old female is a different dynamic than a 30 or 40-year-old female working with a 30 or 40-year-old female. It's just a level of comfort that exists, and it's a recognition that it requires, again, a special type of person to work with another person. And so just understanding and being able to answer the question, am I the best person to help this client? And or if there's another person on your team, or if there's someone that you could bring to help you and your team to be responsive in helping create and maintain that relationship. Because at the end of the day, what we want is to be able to get folks to be able to provide a service.
I think that's so important, that lesson and that wisdom around the importance of the relationship between you and the providers you're working with. And really also, in addition to hearing advice here around the importance of right person to build the relationship, taking time to have those relationships, it's also sounds like really the commitment to stick to it, to hang in there patiently and supportively with the providers that you're helping navigate through really big barriers, whether it's a workforce development system that you're engaging with, or a licensing system, or a local permitting system. We really have to have fortitude and distress tolerance to model to our providers and guide them. Heidi, I think I'm going to pass to you for our next question for our panelists.
Yeah. So in reflection, and I know you're all still relatively early in your initiative, in reflection on where you are today, if you look back, what would you change if you could do it again? What's one thing you would change? And if you think about the listeners in other regions on the call, what is one piece of advice you would give them? So what would you change looking back? And if you could do it all over again, and for somebody who might want to replicate this idea in another region, what's one thing you would tell them? One piece of advice. Stephanie, Taya, would you like to jump in? And then we'll jump to you, Catherine and Karen, and then Gustavo.
I think that Taya really kind of brought this up with the last question, and that is to make sure with the Shared Services Alliance with your members that they have a level of computer literacy that's going to allow them to do the work, to engage with the Wonder School platform and such, and also to start off slower, to make sure they have the foundation that they need and understand what the fiscal, what they need to know in order to strengthen the fiscal health of their businesses. We talk a lot about relationships, and that is key. We had a conversation the other day that you can have somebody who's good on paper and's got all the qualifications, but they don't have that relationship building skill, or they're great at building relationships and don't have the knowledge or experience that they need to provide the information. So it's really important that you have the right people in place. But I think that we did learn, and we've talked about this today too, is you have to push them, but you don't push them too hard. You have to go at the rate that your providers are capable of going at or able to go at. And you can't keep everybody at the same pace. You have to spend more time with some people than other people, and just get to know them. Get to know them as people before you try to input information and hope that they'll understand it. But yeah, be patient, start slow. Taya, do you have anything else?
Just that I was just thinking back in the listening sessions days, people were definitely like, yes, automation would be amazing. And then when we sat down, they were like, ew, we don't we don't want to do automation. And so that there was an interesting gap there between purely hypothetical and ooh, okay, now that I'm like looking at a computer, I don't really know if this is my thing, and having various concerns about how parents would feel about automation. And so that was really interesting. We didn't see that coming, that the providers would really worry about the parents. But I think I'm not sure what my advice is, other than to say that we thought that they were just going to be like, yay, and we were giving them something they absolutely wanted. And we kind of got there and we had to do a little more like, here's why this will be useful. And a little more convincing, I guess. It wasn't as an easy sell as we thought it would be, but I think here's my advice, is that you really need a person to call and do like very targeted recruitment. And we found that the people who have been ready for initiatives, interesting new stuff, are mostly people who are fairly within like the first 3 years of having opened their business, because they're much more willing to try new things during that time. And so I think that's something that we learned was being targeted. And then also it takes somebody all the way along to not only recruit, but then keep people going, when the reality is you're going to have to mess around with this online platform for a while to learn it. And that might not be what you wanted to do, but part of learning it. So yeah.
Yeah, our alliance, originally we targeted baby promise programs and programs that had been in business for a while. And so now that we're going with more newer programs, like I said, programs that have finished our business accelerator program, it's a lot easier to engage them, because we're helping them build that really, really strong foundation, and I was going to say, I just did a tax training through OCA the other day. And, one of the things that kind of hit me was, when we're doing revenues and expenses and telling them the importance of this and you getting paid, and, they're like, yeah, okay, I'll get paid. But working backwards from the 1040, you're going to have to do your taxes this year. So here, let's work backwards. Here's what you're going to need. So real life, like you may not want to raise your rates. You may not want to charge your family, or, be on your families about paying on time. That's your prerogative, but you will have to file taxes. And in order to do that, you will need to know your revenues and expenses. And so that was kind of something that hit me, is like, give them real life, real world wise.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, I just was going to refocus on Heidi's question. Let's go to Gustavo. What is one piece of advice that you would give to the folks listening in on this call, thinking about how to build capacity in their communities?
All this work requires collaboration. No one organization can provide every single thing. And what I mean is, you're providing entrepreneurship, you're providing childcare, you're providing training, you might be even providing the service. And if you have the staff, each of those programs require staff to be able to do. And then you need staff to be able to train. And oftentimes the capacity is limited from in one area or another. For example, you might have enough staff in the entrepreneurship program to provide basic services, but not enough to focus on childcare itself. And so collaborating with your partners in the region, figuring out who's better at doing what, and being intentional about how you collaborate on that program to achieve the overall end goal is essential. The other thing to think about is budgets. And so as you're working at creating a program budget, don't think about just, okay, what do I need, but what do we collectively need to be able to meaningfully provide the spectrum of services that the clients need. I think there's a main topic that's been hit on a lot, which is it varies from client to client. And so if you have a partner who needs literacy support, if you have a partner who needs significant administrative business support, provider support, so on and so forth, the amount of time that it's going to, and energy that's going to require to help that one client to get to the same is going to be significant. You add 5 hours per client, you have 10 clients, that's 50 hours more you're adding. And so I share that because these numbers add quickly and they add fast. And so if there's one thing that I wish we would have done is been I don't know how I want to say this, and I hesitated the way that I was going to say it because it was going to sound over budget your time or overestimate your time, because even if you overestimate, you're still probably going to be under, especially for providing direct services one-on-one training, because there's no way to really measure the amount an individual needs until you start working with the clients, which leads me to my second point is create an intake process on the items that are essential for folks to know are skills that they'll need to know in order to be successful in moving through the program, to give you an idea to gauge where they're at so you can better tailor in a quantitative way the types of services they will need to be successful. And you can create a specific program for that individual, tailored to that individual, leveraging the program and services that are being provided across your collaborative partners.
Gustavo, thank you so much. That's really helpful. I really appreciate hearing your comment and saw a lot of heads nodding. Over budget your time, or over create a budget that reflects more than you think you're going to need. Thank you for that. Catherine and Karen, as you look back, what's one piece of advice you'd give a community looking to replicate what you're doing?
I really think Gustavo just nailed it with the time piece. It just always takes so much longer than you think it's going to, whether it be your time in preparing for a project or rolling it out. And with childcare, there are just so many variables. And when it comes out in a different community, might have been figured out in one, but it's going to look different in another community because you're talking about an entirely different region, different people, everything is different. So yeah, I think he nailed that one.
Right, thank you. We definitely heard relationships matter. They're very important. We heard the power of collaborations and leveraging your partnerships. We heard taking it slow and really starting with where a provider is. And as you both emphasized, allocating more time and budget for that support that's going to be needed. So we're going to go in our remaining time. We'd love to take questions from chat, in the chat box. And while we're doing this, we have a survey, an end of our time together survey that we would really like your feedback on. It's very short, super short, to invite you to share if these conversations are valuable to you, if so, why? And also what, if you'd like to have more of these conversations, and if you have specific topics you'd like. So Dana has put the SurveyMonkey link while we're here in our last 10 minutes-ish. Would like to invite you to fill that out as we're taking some questions in the chat box. And let's see. Megan, have you seen some?
It's been mostly comments or questions that are super specific to presenter, like what counties do you work in? So I would encourage you, if you're on the call and you have a question for any of the presenters about locations that they work in, or you're asking that because you would like them to be working in your community, I want to encourage you to make those connections directly. I did see a question early on about substitutes that I'm curious, especially if maybe the Shared Services Alliance has thoughts. I've got to get back to it. So a couple questions. I'll just pair these together. Early on, I believe this was during the time that the South Coast Alliance was presenting. Someone asked, what are childcare teachers expecting for salaries and benefits? How are you meeting these expectations? And then any tips on how to find substitute teachers. So I would open that to any of the panelists, like as you've been doing this work, have you found anything that, have any of your strategies been able to address salaries, wages, compensation, getting people in the door, getting people working, and then any insight on anything related to substitutes?
So here, on the south, because we did do a substitute training pool that the members of our alliance were able to use at no charge to them. It was a pilot project again. We're very open to doing pilot projects here. They don't scare us too much. But the substitute pool that we did here, it worked out really well. Our providers, I'm going to be honest, our providers were at first a little hesitant, even the ones, that we've heard that providers want substitutes, but especially our family providers, we're a bit hesitant to let people in their homes. So we arranged for them to be able to meet the people and do walkthroughs and get a feeling for who they wanted. But substitutes are it's a real problem across the board. Finding people with that flexibilities in their schedules, especially here rural, they're not going to work full time. So yeah, it's difficult. We now have some of our providers who've gone out and looked for substitutes, bring somebody in, just with the basic training and basically grow their own. We're hoping to be able to do another substitute pool and see how that goes. But yeah, that's a tough one. Taya, what do you think?
Yeah, we're looking to kind of try to align with the statewide sub pool and bring people in and connect them directly with shared services through some shared services activities, but also then they would be available for the rest of our region. So we do have some planned recruitment for subs to join the statewide sub pool, because we're not sure people are just going to do it out of the blue. So we're going to be really offering some training and incentives to get people to maybe both do kind of another version of our program just for shared services, but also get them signed up so they can sub for anybody in our region. So I think that's a suggestion I would have as the statewide sub pool rolls out, figuring out how to try to help recruit people to join it so that they'll be available for your region.
And this is Melissa. I would just add that there were basically 3 types of audiences for our subpool. One audience was individuals who just wanted to help the small business, right? They're friends with their small business owner and they just want to help them out. We had the second audience was individuals who wanted to, test what is it like working in this industry. And then we also had a third audience who had long-term goals of opening their own business. So just be mindful of what are the goals of those individuals who are exploring. What's the why behind them engaging?
Thank you. We had a question in the chat about plans to reach more culturally specific communities in other languages. I think would like to actually stretch that question a bit and put it to you, Gustavo. When as a culturally specific provider, a culturally specific and linguistically specific organization, what advice do you have for people on this call that want to engage more cultural communities, engage more linguistic communities in their capacity building work? Certainly, we've heard the importance of partnership. So partnering with organizations that are culturally specific to those communities is one path. But what advice do you have for mainstream dominant culture organizations that are wanting to engage more cultural communities and more linguistic communities in this work?
Thank you for the question. That question actually ties to a comment that I had made earlier about requiring a special kind of person. Most folks are comfortable with folks who are like, and they don't have to be like-minded, like anything, but they have similar, there's a lot of relatable experiences shared between the two individuals that easily helps facilitate the relationship building between the two individuals. And one of those is having folks who are of that culture or of that background or of that experience to be the ones who are doing the initial outreach. So that oftentimes can look and or reflect in expanding your team to have folks from who have similar backgrounds, relationships, a lot of relatable qualities with the communities that you seek to engage. Now, I can understand that was a very political way of me saying diversify your workforce, but I say it with the intention that it helps ease in relationship building. And if you think about your own personal experiences, the folks that you're most likely comfortable with is you have shared spaces, shared relationships, whether that be your religion, whether that be your proximity, whether that be your cultural practices. Ethnicity is just one that we commonly see and it's an easy default, but there are so many relatable experiences, and really it's determining on the type of diversity that you're looking to incorporate in the populations that you reach. Guatemalan populations are just as different from Mexican populations as it is between African Americans and or Black folks and white folks. And so I share that because even though they may be from a Spanish speaking place of origin, that doesn't mean they're anything alike. And that's true across all cultures. I mean, just to give you an example, Mexico itself has over 250 dialects and indigenous populations within Mexico itself. Spanish just happens to be the common language. If you look at communities from Africa, the amount of dialects and indigenous populations within Africa are even greater. And you know what most of their common language is? English, because they can't understand each other in their own indigenous languages between the different communities. And so English is actually oftentimes a common language between African cultures. And so that's me saying it's going to vary from community to community, but depending on the population that you're looking to engage, there's got to be some natural relationship building factors between the two individuals who are engaging. And I'm talking about the community member that you're looking to recruit and engage in your program and the person who's doing the recruiting. One of the things that I will note that was discussed in a previous question that I think is also important is to really consider the liability as you're bringing folks into your program to support, making sure that you check all the boxes related to the liability, making sure they get background checks, have basic CPR, first aid, all those items, because things are great when folks are able to help, but the challenges when an instance or an issue comes up, those things can really destroy a program, especially if you don't have those boxes checked. So making sure that you ensure proper safety protocols and ensure liability is covered as you're moving forward in providing your service.
Gustavo, thank you. Christy, if you wouldn't mind sharing the contact slide. So we're winding down today for nearing the end of our time together. And thank you for those of you, first of all, thank you for attending today and for filling out the survey. Next steps. We will share with you the contact information of the presenters here today. A recording will be made available and the PowerPoint slides and information shared today for those of you who are here today and those who registered. We really are interested if this is a conversation, if these types of conversations you would like to continue. There are other organizations and groups who have facilitated some of these conversations as well. The Great Workforce Conference that took place in Central Oregon in November, there is potential of continuing some of these conversations. So appreciate your feedback and input on that survey. Please feel free to reach out to the presenters who are here today if you'd like additional information. There was a lot shared, and I understand if you have more questions. And I just want to thank again our sponsors, Ford Family Foundation, Oregon Community Foundation, and Wild Rivers Coast Alliance for sponsoring this today, for your leadership, and for all of you, for you as presenters, for Melissa, Stephanie, and Tayan from Coos Curry, from Karen and Catherine from Central Oregon, and Gustavo from Eastern Oregon. Thank you all for taking time to be here today and for the work that you're doing to try to expand and sustain childcare in your area. It's a journey, and it will take all of us to really create that, to create solutions and impact. Thank you, everyone. Megan, thank you for facilitating with me, and we will see you all in our future work together.